no, to answer the question. But that's not the point, fellow detectives. I'm more interested in taking a look at what it was about this game that set in motion the series we know and love. So let's crack the case of Secrets Can Kill. Before we jump into the game, this case calls for a little bit of background on what Her Interactive was at this point, and what the gaming landscape was like when Nancy Drew Games entered the picture. Her Interactive was founded in 1995. It was originally a division of American Laser Games called Games for Her Interactive, and the studio's focus was on producing video games specifically for girls, because they were, and are, often excluded from the gaming community. Her Interactive wanted to create empowering, exciting games for a female audience, so naturally the studio's first title was a high school dating sim. It was called Mackenzie & Co. I took a look at some timely reviews from when the game was published, and there was also criticism when it was released that it was less than groundbreaking, that it reinforced stereotypes and didn't expand the themes of the game past dating and fashion. So Her Interactive hadn't delivered a stellar debut, but it was popular enough that they continued making games, and there are two milestones important to our story. In 1997, they acquired the Nancy Drew license, and in 1999, Megan Geyser joined Her Interactive as CEO. Geyser was with Her Interactive as CEO until 2011, and remained Chief Creative Strategy Officer until 2013. These games have the legacy they do because of her vision and oversight.
I didn't know there were no games for girls, so I took a job. And then, a year and a half later, we created our first game. And we took it to all the publishers and to the retail shelves, and all of them said, "This is a really good quality game. But I'm sorry, girls are computer phobic and they will never play video games."
She was so passionate about delivering these games for girls and had a very clear understanding of what makes the Nancy Drew character resonate with her audience.
Nancy Drew has touched American women so palpably. Every time I tell a woman what I do, they will first usually bow down out of respect to Nancy, and secondly, begin to tell me why they are so successful because of Nancy Drew. There is this "I can do it" spirit. Totally empowering.
It's really obvious why she was able to make Nancy the breakout star of Her Interactive. So that's hardly an exhaustive history of Her Interactive's inception, but it sets the stage for where the girl gaming landscape was at when the first Nancy Drew game, Secrets Can Kill, debuted in 1999. Let's get into the game proper. Nancy is called to the scene of a murder at Paseo del Mar High School in Florida. The murdered student was Jake Rogers. We learn that Jake was an unpopular bully, courtesy of the other students who coldly slander his character mere hours after he was beaten up and thrown down a staircase.
Jake Rogers was a total creep. Nobody liked him. I gotta go now. Later.
Nancy's contact at the school is another teenager, Daryl Gray. Daryl found Jake's body, but besides that, I'm not sure what qualifies him to be our contact. In any case, Nancy will periodically share updates with Daryl about the case, and he never has any helpful advice.
I think I'm going to enjoy being your contact.
At the school, which is still open and operating as usual, we meet our cast of archetypes. Connie is cool and mysterious. Hal is a burnt-out exchange student. And Hulk only knows about football.
All I know about is football.
Eventually, we learn that Jake was blackmailing all of his fellow students. Hal had plagiarized an essay, Connie had fraudulently entered a male-only judo tournament, and Hulk had broken into a pharmacy to steal and abuse steroids. Daryl's not the golden boy he appears to be either. He's a drug runner for this previously unseen character and our culprit, Mitch Dillon. Jake was blackmailing Mitch, too, and Mitch killed him to cover his operation. With Daryl's help, Nancy sets up a sting to catch Mitch. Connie shows up at the last minute to help because she has a crush on Daryl and doesn't want him to be murdered. She bursts in with a kick-ass roundhouse, incapacitating Mitch while Nancy points a gun at him. In our happy ending, Connie is teaching Daryl judo, Hal has gotten a scholarship, and Hulk has repaid the damage he caused to the pharmacy. Hope he's doing all right. So that's the game in a nutshell. How does it stack up to its successors? The most glaring problem with the game is its writing, particularly for Nancy herself. Not that our suspects have exceptional dialogue, but we might get more useful information out of them if Nancy knew how to construct a full sentence. The conversations in this game are absurd. Nancy can repeat the last thing that was said to her, but as a question.
A new face. Hi, my name's Hal. You sure arrived on a day with a lot of activity.
Activity?
Or ask something jarring out of thin air.
Are you forgetting one of your classmates was just murdered this morning?
Hey!
But this isn't simply an issue of bad writing. It's a symptom of the way this game, like plenty of early adventure games, uses its dialogue. Compared to later Nancy Drew games, Secrets Can Kill focuses less on developing characters and relationships, and more on using dialogue as the method to give the player their next clue. The conversations aren't dynamic, because they're tools to get Nancy to the next point of interest. This applies to phoning Nancy's friends as well. This game establishes the mainstay element of calling Bess, George, and Ned on the phone. In other games, Nancy might take the opportunity to fill them in on the case. We'd learn about some hijinks they were up to back home, they'd give us their opinions on what's going on. But here, we call them up and they give us a clue to our next move and hang up.
This is Bess. Bess, I need some help. Any ideas?
Can you use Aunt Eloise's login and password to access the school administration computers? I bet they're in the teacher's lounge.
No pleasantries, no how's it going back in River Heights, just a hint machine. The rhythm of conversation doesn't help either. Nancy introduces herself as a new student and instantly starts probing everyone about the murder with the same set of questions. It puts everyone on edge and they keep ending the conversations and telling Nancy to go away.
Sorry, can't talk now. I gotta go to practice. Later.
I gotta go now. Later.
I feel uncomfortable speaking about this now. Please, excuse me.
But we need their information because it's going to lead us to the next clue and we can't move on without it. So we have to go right back to them and ask another question, which they might get mad at and tell us to go away. And it prevents Nancy from building a rapport with anyone.
I'm not into pushy girls. Do me a favor. Bother someone else.
What is it you want now?
Oh, it's you, Nancy.
Compare this to a game like The Deadly Device, where Nancy similarly has to ask a bunch of people about a murder they don't want to talk about.
First, I need to ask some intrusive questions.
Oh.
There are additional options to ask them about their work, learn a bit about their perspectives, and depending on the character, establish a little trust. When characters in that game tell Nancy to go away,
let me get back to work.
We can just go away for a little bit and do something else, because their dialogue isn't just there to unlock the next step of the game. In the climaxes of both games, Nancy has to implore one of these characters to help her. In The Deadly Device, Ryan is happy to help Nancy because they've established a relationship. In Secrets Can Kill, everybody refuses to help Nancy.
I wish I could, Nancy. I can't take that kind of risk right now.
Connie comes through in the last moment, and it's supposed to be a triumphant surprise, but there was no inkling that she was ever inclined to help Nancy, because Nancy hadn't built up any rapport with her, because our dialogue with her was only antagonistic questions and answers related specifically to the next action the player was supposed to take.
What is it you want now?
While we're on the subject of developed characters, the culprit in this game, Mitch, is not one. In fact, we don't even meet him until the finale of the game. There are a few exceptions, but in general, you expect a Nancy Drew game to be a whodunit. You meet a colorful cast of suspects, and you know that, inevitably, one of them will be the culprit. But in this debut game, we not only don't meet this culprit until the final showdown, but also don't have enough information to predict whodunit. But, okay, adventure games don't have to be character or story dependent. Plenty of games are more like solo puzzle gauntlets with loose narrative bookends. Secrets Can Kill has 2 puzzles. One is a slider puzzle that you find pretty early on, and the other is a setting the dials correctly puzzle. That one is timed and has game-ending consequences, which make it more interesting, but it's not difficult. So if we're not solving puzzles or questioning suspects, how do we solve this mystery? Well, mostly through written codes and riddles, most of which are posted on the school bulletin boards or highlighted in books and on signs. In fact, most things in this game are foreshadowed or commanded by these riddles, and the game can play pretty unintuitively without them. For example, would you naturally think of replacing this pair of bolt cutters with this soup ladle to stop a gas leak? Maybe, because you've played a lot of Nancy Drew, But this is the first game, so I venture that you might not try that right away. Luckily, there's a code here that says, Bolt Cutter's Soup Ladle. For just about everything you learn, find, or do in the game, there's a corresponding clue giving you the hint to do it. You can learn Mitch's name at the very beginning of the game by looking in this book. Just his name, nothing else. But why? There could be more interesting, engaging ways to deliver some of this information. Instead of putting Mitch's name in a coded book, put his business card in the diner. If this code, explaining Connie's motivation for competing in the judo tournament, is necessary, maybe the conversations you have with her about it haven't been robust enough to give the player the information they need. A few riddles here and there are fun. Hints are great, but you shouldn't need a hint or a secondary explanation for every action in the game, unless the game is not flowing properly or things aren't already explained in a satisfying way. The player also has to view some very specific items to trigger Nancy to make a connection between pieces of information. If you don't, you'll hit very frustrating dead ends. If you don't take a look at this specific judo poster, you won't be able to talk to Connie about the judo school or the tournament. If you don't read this article about steroids in this particular magazine in the library, you can't talk to Hulk about the pharmacy break-in.
Why would I know about a robbery? All I know about is football.
Secrets Can Kill feels a lot like a mini-mystery that you might buy a little book of or see in a magazine. The focus is not on whodunit, but on figuring out what happened based not on intuition or genuine detective work, but on a very specific set of clues, with very little interest paid to any kind of world building or character interaction, or even general logic. I'm really raking this game over the coals, so I want to take a moment to talk about what I like about this game. I like the original theme song. This is the only game it appears in before it was replaced by the iconic one you probably remember, but this one is so suspenseful and exciting, it feels like it came right out of a 90s TV thriller. I like the unimportant details you get to look at. I know this is a negative sticking point for a lot of players, but I like having unimportant world building to explore. It makes it more exciting when you do hone in on something significant. I like that as the game goes on, the characters become more aggravated when you approach them. I know I criticized the pacing of the conversations, but I do like this effort towards making the interactions evolve as the game goes on.
I'm not into pushy girls. Do me a favor. Bother someone else.
Bye.
Bye, Nancy.
I like exploring the environment. I like a game that encourages the player to find passwords, read books, connect the dots without obvious prompts or hand-holding. So while the riddles were too much, at least they encourage the player to explore the world and make discoveries. And when you find a riddle, Nancy doesn't immediately comment on it and tell you what it's supposed to mean, which becomes a big feature in later games. Finally, I want to revisit Her Interactive's mission with this game. Did they successfully deliver a title to pioneer gaming for women and girls? Kind of. It clearly worked. It proved those publishers wrong, who told Megan Geyser girls were computer-phobic. It kicked off a wildly beloved series that remains very influential to the women who played it as kids. Like, why am I even talking about this 26-year-old game? But on its own, as a singular product looked at in hindsight, Luckily, the name Nancy Drew came with enough clout that I think players could attribute enough nostalgia or attachment to the character already. She didn't have to be perfectly characterized in this debut, and even if you didn't know Nancy Drew, you could just project your own badass self onto the generic dialogue and still have a pretty good time if you wanted to play a detective game. So aside from Nancy, Connie is the only female character in the game. Connie, of course, has the storyline about entering the male judo tournament. She entered the male division because it paid more. And there's something there, right? But there's no commentary on it. And I don't expect a manifesto. Megan Geyser emphasized making a good game, not just a game scientifically engineered to appeal to women. So there's something to be said for not just adding everything off of a checklist that you think a feminist game ought to have, because that could easily become very cynical and players will know if they're being pandered to. But they really do miss an opportunity when it comes to a satisfying conclusion for Connie's story. She ends up dating the guy she likes, and that's fine, but how about some more than that? She can date Daryl and be a judo champion, but the game only focuses on the former, and it stands out. Especially after Mackenzie & Co. was criticized for marketing itself as a feminist title, but only focusing on what one review called the dubious objective of getting a prom date. Maybe Connie opens her own judo school. Maybe she convinces the Crane School that it's totally unfair that the male winners get paid more. Anything to tie up her personal goals. When the game was touted as an industry-disrupting title specifically for women, it's an odd choice for Connie's story to be so male-centric. This all is likely an unfortunate result of the inconsistent writing overall. To be fair, the male characters don't get much more out of their endings either. Everybody gets a short sentence to explain how they're all doing great now, so we can feel good about the happy ending. It's just more noticeable for Connie when you're primed for a game that's going to deliver excellent female characters. But even though they didn't perfectly hit their mark here, Secrets Can Kill was good enough to be a starting point. It was enough in 1999 to have a game with a female heroine that didn't solely focus on fashion and romance, a game that wasn't perfectly stylized to try to catch girls' attention, but was just an appealing adventure. It was effective enough to hook thousands of players, women and men who still care about this franchise over 20 years later. You don't have to do everything perfectly at once, and this game was a successful launch in the right direction. So no, this game's not good, but that's okay. Let me know when you last played Secrets Can Kill. If it was the first Nancy Drew game you played, did you love it? And if you played it later, how well do you think it set the tone for the rest of the series? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next case.